Good afternoon. Welcome to a fantastic session today. We're talking about AI opportunities for the pensions industry. I'm delighted to be joined by Liam McGrath here. He's CEO of Procentia. Liam joined Procentia in August last year. You've got a lot of experience in the industry. You've had very senior leadership roles at Equinity, Personal Group, Royal Bank of Scotland, and now obviously with Procentia. We've got a packed up audience. It's great to have so many people standing room. AI is obviously a key buzzword. We've been hearing a lot at conference and here to talk about it a little bit more. So the way we're going to run this quick fireside chat, we're going to have a 10-minute conversation with Liam, and then we do want questions from the audience and make sure you have them ready. But before we start, I just want to do a quick poll by show of hands. If you put your hand up, if you feel you have a good understanding of what AI is and what AI can do. Fantastic. We've got a couple of people. So, Liam, you're speaking to the right audience here.
Good.
So, AI, obviously, clearly a huge area of growth. Lots of industries are adopting and implementing it at different rates. Can you tell us a little bit more? What are you seeing around the world that pensions industry is doing in this regard?
Yeah, so I think pensions has been a bit slower to the mark with AI. If you look at this very conference last year, there was 0 sessions dedicated to AI. And now we've got a few, and all the plenaries that I've attended, or at least even if it's not on AI, they're mentioning AI. And Professor Harfouch's session yesterday, for those of you who hadn't seen it, watch it on the replay. It was a really good session. But pensions is catching up. So there are a few firms in the UK publicly saying they're using AI. Our friends at Aviva being one of them. A lot of the usage is around operational areas, so chatbots, automation, etc. A couple of firms have integrated into Amazon Alexa. So when you're making dinner, you can say, "Hey Alexa, what's my pension fund worth? What funds am I invested in?" And who knows, maybe down the line you can start switching funds as well. Japan, the largest scheme in the world, the government pension investment fund, have actually trialled using AI to pick investment managers. So they've been using an AI to look at investment management performance on a daily basis and have shown some really positive results in terms of driving better returns from the AI picking the investment managers. So there are. It is developing, but it's still early days, I think, in the pensions industry.
Let's turn to a little bit from the work that you've been doing at Procentia. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's the team setup when it comes down to AI, and what are some of the case uses that that you have?
So we're actually using a partner, a specialist AI consultant, to help us look at the use cases, particularly for us. So we're a pensions administration software provider. Some of the largest schemes are our clients. So how can we use AI to help those clients better serve their members? And actually, interesting, a lot of it's around data science versus typical AI, such machine learning or GPT type models. It's actually more, let's get some data scientists in, understand the data, what is the data telling us, and then potentially using the GPT models, etc., to start to use predictive work. But we've kind of identified, and the other thing I did, even before I knew I was doing this session, I actually asked ChatGPT, what are the use cases for AI in pensions? And it came up with 11. I'd urge you all to do that. The 11 are really plausible. And you can see where AI could help in those 11 use cases. But the ones we want to focus on, because we largely want to deliver to our clients, first of all, fraud detection and prevention. I think during the pandemic and post-pandemic, there was a survey done. 1 in 10 people had either been the victim of pension fraud or knew someone who had been the victim of pension fraud. So it's a big problem. And I've worked in a business where we used machine learning to detect fraud in invoice financing. So you can just take that model straight away and apply that to a pension scheme. So what are the patterns of behaviour that you see with a member, for example, prior to then someone being scammed of their retirement savings? So fraud detection and prevention is a big one for us. Creating and delivering retirement saving plans, so from plan design, participant engagement, plan governance, picking the investment strategies. Pertinent one, personalised dashboards. I don't mean the pensions dashboard, but personalised dashboards for members. is another one. And then probably the one where we've got the most traction and we're doing the most in at the moment is actually automating processes. So automating processes for members, transactions, analytics, and recently we are right now helping one of our biggest schemes to develop a completely online retirement process using digital ID&V. And as many of you know, most of the digital ID&V platforms have machine learning underpinning the results in there. So those are the use cases that we're looking at.
Great, thank you. So obviously positives here. Let's take a look at some of the challenges then. What are the perhaps perceived challenges that you see in terms of for the industry to be able to adopt AI?
Well, again, Professor Harfouche yesterday really laid out some of the cultural and ethical issues of using AI. And in fact, on the 1st and 2nd of next month, the government are holding their AI Safety Summit, where they're going to look at some of those challenges and look at how they potentially need to regulate AI in order to make sure we don't have some of those unintended consequences. I mean, one of the things, so a lot of people will use the word predictive with AI. It is predictive, but only in what it knows in the past or what it's been told. So Professor Harfouche's example where, if you talk to an AI and say, show me a picture of a CEO, as Professor Harfouche did, you get pictures of white middle-aged men. That's because that's what the past has been. And an AI can't predict the future because it only learns from what it's seen in the past and what it therefore thinks, right, this is the next best prediction for that. So I think definitely there's an understanding piece there, but also some of those biases that may come into play. And indeed, the DWP, the Information Commission's Office, has actually warned the government that they may be in contempt of court because the ICO have been asking for information on how the government has been using AI in assessing fraudulent claims within the DWP. What's turned out is that, as Professor Harfouche was saying, it's actually biasing against vulnerable groups, so disabled, ethnic. So the AI is actually picking up those and saying this is fraudulent, this is fraudulent, this is fraudulent. But it's just a bias that the model has introduced itself. So I think the government itself is in a little bit of hot water over that. And then there's some more prosaic challenges with AI. So data quality, the models are only as good as the data you put in. I think most of you would appreciate that. We need to invest much more time and effort in data cleansing and data quality if we're going to use these models properly. Data security is another one. I mean, GDPR has transformed the way we handle and work with data. When you're using AI, it's a little bit grey still in terms of how are we using someone's personal data, so I think that's going to be a challenge. And then lastly, infrastructure and legacy platforms and compatibility with those legacy platforms with the newer AI sort of ready platforms. So I think those are some of the key challenges that we're facing at the moment.
Just to pick up the point about time, the time needed, the data points, or time needed, and the data that is extra that is needed. How much time? What are those, the kind of the trajectories there?
Yeah.
How much data is enough?
It's how long is a piece of string, I guess. This is again where I think a lot of it is going to still. It's like traditional software development that we do. At Procentia, you've got to test, and how much testing do you do? It's all about a little bit of a risk-based decision making around: is it now producing 95% correct answers or 90%? So a lot of it depends on where people and organisations will put those thresholds and confidence levels in the fact that I trust the AI is making the right decisions.
In terms, something that perhaps again was flagged yesterday a little bit, was in terms of the potential misuse of data. How much of a concern is that?
Well, again, I mentioned, data security is going to be huge. Where you're storing that data, how secure is that when you're moving that data around, which is often, I don't know how much over the next few days people are talking about cyber, but a lot of it is when you in the intersections of where you're moving data from and to is where there's attack vectors there for cyber. So I think because you're such large amounts of data, there is a vulnerability there that I think companies are going to have to invest in really locking down their databases.
So, to summarise, what could the future look like for AI?
Well, I think one of the things I think is linking, in the pensions industry, is linking open banking / open data, whichever term you prefer, and that's going to give the ability for an individual to see their complete financial ecosystem as an individual, almost like an individual balance sheet. And MassMutual in the US have started to use AI on that front with some of their customers. So they're linking their 401k retirement plans, their student loans, because they're huge in the US, any other loans they've got, but also with their assets, so property values. So bringing in property valuation tools so that an individual can really see that entire picture and then really make better and more informed decisions about their retirement savings, and then when they come to retirement, what they actually do with their sort of that personal balance sheet.
Great, thank you. Any questions in the audience? We've got a lady over there.
Hiya. This is less of a question and more of a very deeply held fear that I have that I'm hoping that you might be able to put my mind at rest for. But when we're talking about using AI for fraud prevention, what is stopping, and your fraud prevention models are looking at previous fraud that you've been able to identify because of patterns, what is stopping scammers from identifying those patterns themselves and then just making a version of the fraud that's going to get around the checks that we already put in place? Like, how do you keep those models up to date?
I mean, that is a great question, and in my experience, having worked in other financial services, that is what you're always up against. So you're always up against the ever-evolving fraudster. Even way back in the day where banks have floor limits in terms of transfer, those move around, so you try and stop the fraudsters because they're constantly targeting just under the floor limit. It's a tough one, but again, these models do learn. As I said, they're not predictive, but they learn constantly. So if another fraud appears where they've mirrored a pattern, then that will learn and then start to alert and block that. So I don't think you can ever get to that sort of zero fraud space where no one's going to be able to commit fraud, because largely, again, humans are in the process, and when humans are in the process, you're always fallible.
Any other questions? Lady over there. Perhaps before we come to again, perhaps a question around time horizons of some of the cases, uses that you were talking about. Are you using them at the moment? What's the sort of evolution of application of some of these use cases?
Yeah, so as I said, we're using other applications now that have got machine learning built in. So the ID&V systems, fraud prevention systems. So I think the time horizon for those is pretty near term, right? I think within the next 12 months, I think you'll have a lot of automated customer service or member services in pensions specifically. So I think that time horizon is probably now, next 12 months. It's really what's going to be in 24 months and beyond.
Mm.
Hi.
Hi.
You've partially answered the question there, really, in terms of time horizon, but I'm quite intrigued. Open banking is something you've referenced, but I don't see massive take-up because I think there's some fear about kind of broadly sharing all of your financial data. And I do agree that the power of AI often is bringing that data set together. So is this a younger generation thing when it's really going to take off, that people are willing to share enough critical mass of their personal data to really get value from AI in financial and pension planning?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is generational. I think the younger generation are much more comfortable with giving their data to an open banking provider, and them having access to all of their data. I mean, hands up, who's switched their bank accounts in the last 5 years? Yeah, so I know I could get a better deal on my bank account. I just don't switch because I'm an older gentleman. I might not look it, but so I think it is generational, and therefore it will be gradual in terms of that sort of adoption, as the Gen Ks that we learnt about yesterday really, I think, will be comfortable with those sorts of tools.
Thank you. Any other questions? Going around. Should we talk a little bit about safeguards and what kind of safeguards can you put in place in terms of, we talk about the retirement savings plan, for example. So where does the human element perhaps come in to make sure that these are good, correct, and that essentially the offering has value?
So two things on safeguards. I think the first one I'd come back to again, good old-fashioned testing approach. So putting a system like an ML or an AI system into something in a process, you've got to run it in parallel with your existing process. You've got to see what results, compare the results. And again, it will come down to risk appetite and when is enough good enough for you to have the confidence that it's safe. But then I think there's the broader piece again that Professor Harfouche talked about, and what I hope the government AI Safety Summit gets to in a couple of weeks is I think it's going to have to be some regulation around the use of AI and what data people are then putting through systems, what they're using that for, and what behaviour they're trying to influence. So I think we need the government to step in and start to set some standards.
Checking any other questions? Don't be shy. We've got a great expert here. Oh, gentleman over there. Perhaps again another question for you in terms of how do you see the skill set needed? So how can AI transform the skill set for pension administrators?
Well, I think as we've seen with even just with automating processes where you're then freeing up administrators, I think you develop their skill set even more because they're not having to deal with the mundane, repetitive processes. You actually then they're then focusing on the difficult cases or fraud cases, and therefore they will need training and their knowledge will evolve. And so I think what you'll see is a direction towards much more skilled pension administration workforce, whilst the AI deals with the rest.
Hi. How worried should we be about sort of deep fake or indeed a Terminator type scenario where the machines take over?
The singularity. I don't know if I'm qualified to mention that. I mean, this is where I'd come back to the governments around the world need to step in and regulate, monitor and manage what's happening within AI in companies, in government departments, so that we don't end up with either deep fake issues or which cause issues or the Terminator singularity scenario.
Fingers crossed there. Any other questions? So one thing we would talk about, I'm curious about how much. One is the singularity aspect, but AI working across different types of pension systems, different applicability, different softwares. How can that sort of where's the connection points really? Because I mean we know there's issues in terms of data providers, data admin. Not everything is sort of matching necessarily. So does AI fulfill a role here?
Well, that comes down to the data cleansing piece we've been talking about. So making sure that you're confident that your data is accurate, it's clean, it's complete, and it's reliable. And I think AI could probably help with that to a certain degree. And you could build an AI tool that you could run over your data and make sure that it's fit for purpose.
Mm. And then in terms of the customer service point that again yesterday Professor Harfouche was exactly talking about the almost personalized approach. Is this all mapped down to in order to have that good outcome, is it all again down to good data?
No, good outcomes aren't necessarily down to good data. If you've got bad data, you always have bad outcomes. So, but I think customer service is the area where I do see AI developing the quickest, not just in the pensions industry. The financial services more broadly is using AI to drive that customer service, efficiency, effectiveness, but also, as you said, in a much more personal way, because it will understand the past history, interactions that customer has had, predicting around, right, this customer is calling me because X, Y, and Z.
Any other questions from the room? Oh, perfect.
Thank you. Could you say something about AI as an influencing tool, both for good and bad, please?
Yeah, so for the good, I think it comes down to, when we stick to retirement savings, the good will be nudging people. Your pot is currently at this, your age this. You've told me you want a lifestyle of X, so actually you need to start savings more, or you need to be thinking about, when you come to retirement, one option you will have to use is selling your property and downsizing. So I think for the good, there's those sorts of influencing that you can do, and for the bad, well, there's all sorts of things like Professor Harfouche was saying around, persuading people. The one that really struck with me was, the dead voices, thing, and your granny telling you, well, you need to sell all of your investments and put them into this rather dodgy investment in Russia. You're not going to say no to your grand's voice. So I think for the bad, it's those sorts of things I think that we'll need to have a look at.
Thank you. And with another question from the lady over there.
Hi. So I think the opportunities for AI in the pensions industry are kind of very exciting, but based on the assumption that everybody has access to the technology, and there are many, many people living in digital poverty, and that isn't necessarily linked to one audience segment. You can't kind of put your finger on, it could be cross-age, cross-gender, cross-ethnicity. So how do we, as an industry, ensure that we're not going to be alienating and ostracising those individuals, of which there are many, when we take this forward? What can we do, or do you think it's more political?
Yeah, I think it's more political, if I'm honest. So I remember I got involved with some charities during the pandemic, and that was around helping, again, people who are in digital poverty to apply for jobs, because they didn't have a laptop, and most jobs now are all on the digital job boards, and you've got to submit your CV digitally, etc., etc. So, I mean, there's obviously a role, I think, for the third sector in that sort of space. I think there's a role for government in that sort of space. And then to what extent I think companies want to get involved around the third sector piece in terms of providing that sort of the digital capability to those groups, I think will be down to the company and what their appetite is for that.
Great, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but if you want to talk to Liam, he's available here, and then also at the stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.